Good morning, Dan and Amy. As we've told you, there's a manhunt underway for 28-year-old Ahmad Khan Rahami, who apparently lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where 5 pipe bombs were found outside a subway station, no one injured, and is responsible now. The report is he's responsible for or connected to the bombings in Chelsea, in Elizabeth, and in Seaside.
And we do know overnight they did pick up detain 5 of his family members who were in one vehicle. I'm sure that led information probably to, them calling him a suspect at this point. But yeah, they're saying he's responsible for the 3 attacks.
All right. Well, for more on this topic of counterterrorism, we're happy to be joined again by our friend Dr. Walid Phares, Fox News Middle East and counterterrorism expert, as well as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor. Dr. Phares, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So your reaction to these, perhaps connected bombings in the eastern seaboard and then the stabbing attack in St. Cloud, Minnesota?
Well, let me go straight to the substance, avoid this whole discussion about we're going to wait to see if it's terrorism or not. That we can discuss if you want in a second. Well, let me say that from my position, having been observing and monitoring and advising on these matters of jihadi terrorism, the fact that basically in Minnesota, the act of terrorism has been recognized by ISIS as one of them, this stretches the context onto all other actions. That's how I analyze it. So what we're seeing right now is a wave, like the Europeans have seen over the past few months, a wave of attacks. Obviously, the attacks do not resemble each other because that's what the guidance is from ISIS or from the jihadi network they are working with or being inspired by. So what that tells me is that this has been coordinated at some level, not all levels, and this is aiming at specifically our national security, more specifically in the area of greater New York because of the meetings. We have, 120 heads of state,
right,
governments coming. So I think this is a way that it won't stop.
So you have Ahmad Khan Rahami. He is a naturalized citizen from Afghanistan. In Minnesota, they've just identified the 22-year-old knife-wielding man there as Dahir Adan. Both are was born in Kenya, but his parents are Somalian. Do we need to do a better job of vetting people who come to this country and looking at their parents under a bigger microscope?
Precisely. This is at the heart of what we are debating right now. We've been discussing this for the last few years, meaning the lack of proper vetting. Proper vetting is not to ask them, are you jihadists? Proper vetting is not to require the police report from Somalia, Kenya, or Afghanistan. That is not. What we need to do is have a network that would combine intelligence, meaning our intelligence, our allies' intelligence, and then a second layer of detecting is these individuals are jihadists, have been indoctrinated, is their environment is. It's a very difficult thing, but we're not even beginning. And the reason for why we're not beginning is, unfortunately, this administration has erased the concept of jihadi ideology since 2009. It's only now that they are saying, oh, maybe that could help. Well, we're 7 years or 6 years and a half late.
And the interesting thing about these attacks, not dissimilar from Orlando, a nightclub, from San Bernardino at a community center, soft targets. We're not, and this seems to be something that ISIS has produced in terms of a directive. Don't go for iconic locations where security is heavy. Go for soft targets because you can inflict the same damage and carnage, and you've got a greater chance of success. And it creates that much more fear because it conveys that anybody, anywhere can be hit.
That's exactly it, my friend. The ISIS strategists and the jihadi strategists at large. And this is not something new, but these strategists in strategic communications have conveyed the message or the guideline that what is important in America or in the West in general is the impact the next day or the next hour, the post-terror attack. Because if one person is killed by a knife or an explosion, it's the same. We are paralyzed. We start a debate again. We don't know where we're going. Political chaos. That's what they actually want. That's why you're absolutely right. This is the doctrine of death by a million cuts. It's not a big wound. It's cut after cut after cut until the society is basically collapsing.
Now, Dr. Walid Phares, what wing of ISIS is claiming responsibility for the Minnesota Mall attack?
It means everything, in my view. It means that ISIS has, as it has promised, cells and individuals around the world and in America. But beyond that, it has an influence over people it may not be in touch with. The guys we call lone wolves are not really lone wolves. They are alone wolves, meaning they operate by themselves, but they are, of course, online. They go on iPhones. They go on every tool to see what ISIS is saying and asking. And they're doing this because they're indoctrinated. So this is the most difficult thing we're facing.
I want to get your reaction to the reactions over the weekend and into today from political leaders. Mayor de Blasio saying over the weekend that this was an intentional act, but there was no connection to terrorism. Well, even if it wasn't connected to ISIS or political Islamic terrorism, setting off bombs is a terrorist act, so he was unwilling to use the terrorism word. Hillary Clinton seemed to kind of gently criticize Donald Trump for using the term bombing, even though she used it and saying I was briefed on the bombings. Your reaction to the language of our political leaders in response to terrorist attacks like this?
We are very behind in this war with the jihadists. I mean, we are, 7 years after this administration began its change of narrative. We are 15 years since 9/11. We're still debating if this is a bomb or not, if this is an act of terror or not, if this is of jihadi nature, if we have the evidence. It's like we are in World War II in Britain, and London and other cities are bombarded, and we are, trying to find the linkage. We are in a war. Of course there is a linkage between all these attacks. Unfortunately, the culture still in our debate is very behind. That's not what's happening in Europe. At least in Europe, they identify it as a wave. They identify it as a confrontation with the Islamists or the jihadists, and more so in the Middle East. Now, I mean, it's amazing that the Middle East is way more advanced than we are on this issue, at least.
So do you think now that we are looking for a suspect, Rouhani, do you think that this is over now, or are you expecting more attacks?
It is very, very difficult to make those projections, and that's what I do in my expertise. I do expect more attempts for attacks, but I hope that between the public and the agencies, the first attack is the most difficult because it's a surprise in a season of attacks. But then the second one will be more difficult if agencies and the public cooperate. And what I would like to see the administration, even now, do is to inform and educate the public. Look what the French president or the prime minister of Britain do when there is an attack. They come on TV and they explain what's happening. They call on assistance from the citizens. In France, they call them soldier citizens. You have to be helping us, but we need to explain it to you.
Now, when President Obama has yet to address this issue.
Right. And now we're talking to Dr. Walid Phares, Fox News Middle East and counterterrorism expert, also Trump campaign foreign policy advisor. And Trump is being criticized, as I mentioned, by Hillary and others for using the word bombing allegedly before he had confirmation that the explosion was a bomb. Do you have any idea kind of what Trump knew and when he knew it, when he got off the plane in Colorado Springs and said, I've just been told that New York City has been hit with a bombing?
I am not privy of the details because I was not with him or didn't get that information. But he is now the Republican nominee. He's getting national security briefings. He is getting from his own experts, including most likely, I cannot confirm, but most likely experts on national security in New York City within the agency. They report to him. They send him also as well as they send to Mrs. Clinton. So him saying this was an explosion or a bomb is not that off from reality what is happening right now.
Now, I want to ask you about this op-ed that Robert Gates, who's a longtime member of the intelligence community, Secretary of Defense for both George W. Bush and Obama administrations in parts. This op-ed he wrote in the Wall Street Journal that essentially tore up both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in terms of their foreign policy, national security chops. He concludes his op-ed saying, at least on national security, I believe Mr. Trump is beyond repair. He is stubbornly uninformed about the world and how to lead our country and government and temperamentally unsuited to lead our men and women in uniform. He is unqualified and unfit to be commander-in-chief.
Look, I mean, if he says that 120 generals, admirals, national security workers, if all these academics surrounding him, if everybody is, not good, that means that this is a political position. I mean, even if I'm opposing Mr. Trump, and I would hear and read his speeches on national security and compare them with Secretary Clinton, these are candidates trying to find strategic answers. The way Secretary Gates is, describing him is beyond. I mean, it's not acceptable. The level of description that he made, that he's not able. What do you mean he's not able to make a national security decision when surrounded by 120 people who have done so for at least the last 3 decades? And
in your personal experience with him, do you find him properly inquisitive and taking information from experts and trying to formulate? I mean, is this your personal experience? Does that run counter to the characterization of Gates?
I can only speak about the details of my personal experience, if at all, after November 9, because we are bound by a document. But what I can say is before I became an advisor, I had the chance to brief him. So it was a free briefer. And then when we discussed maps, and when we looked at the region, the Middle East, and when we looked at homeland security issues, he was asking laser questions. Remember, he has been, as a CEO of a very complex institution, he asks, what are the downsides? What are the alternatives? Seek another opinion. That convinced me that he's able to absorb if he is briefed. I mean, let's compare with Senator Obama, who was basically confronting a national security monument, and that's McCain, or Bill Clinton, who was confronting the head of the CIA. And yet they were well advised, and they won the election.
Yeah. All right. He's Dr. Walid Phares, Fox News Middle East and counterterrorism expert, Trump campaign foreign policy advisor. Dr. Phares, thanks as always for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to add one thing to Phares. On this week's Against the Current, which you can find at upstream-ideas.com, sat down with James Carafano, who we've had on the show from the Heritage Foundation, another national security expert. He's participated in briefings with Trump, and he essentially echoes the sentiments of Dr. Phares and challenges the characterizations of Robert Gates.
And Dr. Walid Phares joined us on our Turnkey.Pro answer line.